My name is Rachel Slater and I work at what's called the Secure Livelihoods Research Consortium, which is a very big research program trying to understand how people make a living, particularly in fragile and in conflict-affected situations. And one of the big things that we've learned in 5 of the countries where we work is that when households are trying to survive, they face all sorts of shocks and stresses. And the really interesting thing that we found is that quite often those shocks and stresses are not just about conflict. There are all sorts of other things that affect people's capacity to make a living. A good example of that is, for example, when people face floods or droughts. And what we find is that people talk about floods and droughts being a much more frequent and common shock than experiencing violence or fighting, even in conflict-affected situations. Now, we can't say that the floods are more impactful on people's lives than a conflict, but what we can say is that they make things very complicated for them. And when we're trying to do things to help people survive in conflict-affected settings, we need to make sure that we address those climate-related shocks that people face. I think the main thing that we've learned about how we support people in those kinds of situations are that we can't work in single sectors. We can't have programs that only do conflict. We can't have programs that only try and address people's access to water or their access to livelihood support. We need to try and find ways of bringing those things together. And there are some examples of programming. For example, programs that try and build infrastructure at the same time as having objectives to reduce conflict within communities that can be really helpful in that regard. If we're going to make a real difference to people's lives in conflict-affected places, we need to program for more than conflict. So we need to incorporate supporting livelihoods and helping people face the risks of flooding or drought or other climate-related activities. Only by putting those things together are we going to make a real difference.